I'm Alex Pace. I'm the owner and CEO of AMP Steelworks, and you are watching the first episode of AMP Steelworks' Havoc Workshop. And in this segment that we call Beers, Bullets, and Science, we'll be discussing recoil and muzzle rise. These are my two esteemed colleagues.
I'm Jesse, and I am the Electronics and Communications Specialist.
I'm Josh, I'm the resident hooligan.
Welcome aboard! AMP Steelworks has been producing our Muzzle Break now for about 2 years. One of the things we found while trying to market this is the market is very cluttered with products that don't actually work. They're very cosmetic and don't actually have any real effect on anything involving recoil or muzzle rise. So how do you know if you have a good product? It's very simple. We're going to use a formula we found to actually evaluate a rifle we built. And we're going to figure out what the felt recoil is. Here's our rifle. It's beautiful, it's my baby. And we're going to go from there. Here's the formula we're going to use. Due to technical difficulties,
like SD card errors and dry erase markers,
we totally did not reshoot this scene inside. Free energy recoil is the recoil force generated by a bullet on a firearm. There are many ways of reducing the felt recoil, but this force is always a constant. In order to reduce the felt recoil, you have to first understand the free energy recoil. For this test, we use my AR-15. My AR-15 and PMC's Gold 223.
Josh.
PMC's Gold 223 cartridge to get a baseline for FRE. First, I'm going to walk you. I'm going to define the terms we will be using, and then I'm going to walk you through the formula. All right, I'm going to start out by defining our terms, and then actually relating that to the weapon system and the ammo we're going to be looking into. All right. M equals the mass of the firearm divided by 32.17, which accounts for gravity. V, or the velocity of the recoiling firearm. WE is the weight in grains of the bullet, in this case 55 grains. VE is the velocity of your bullet in feet per second. This one is 3,200 feet per second. WPG is the weight of the propellant gas. This round produces right around 22 grains. VPG is the velocity of the propellant gas, also measured in feet per second. In this case, there's a little bit of math behind this. It's 3,200 times 1.75, which is a conversion ratio for a rifle, which I'll explain in a second, divided by 5,600 feet per second. 7,000 is your conversion from grains to pounds. It's actually a very common conversion ratio. It's a good thing to put in your kit bag for later. The WF, or weight of the firearm in pounds, my rifle weighs 7.8 pounds. VPG for a rifle is roughly 1.75, and for a pistol will be about 1.50. It goes basically off the, it's your barrel length. There's a lot of factors, and we didn't quite have the tools to measure it in this particular case, but it's not that important for the point we're trying to prove. So that could be a later film. That being said, we're going to go ahead and dive into the formula. Alright, free energy recoil, the formula is fairly simple. It's simply the mass of the firearm times the velocity of the recoiling firearm squared. That sounds pretty straightforward enough, but to solve for the mass and the velocity of the recoiling firearm, we actually got to do a little bit of work. Mass is the easiest. It is simply the weight of the firearm in pounds divided by 32.17. And you can go ahead and just square that off the top just to get it done. And however, the velocity of the recoiling firearm is a bit more complex. First, we have to define, we need to take the weight in grains of the bullet, which is 55, times the velocity of the bullet, which is 32,000, plus the weight of the propellant gas, 22 grain, times the velocity of the propellant gas. And that's all going to all be divided by 7,000 times the weight of the firearm in pounds. Then you're going to square it. And then you can solve for your free energy recoil. Skipping ahead a little bit, you end up with a free energy recoil of 3.637 pounds per square inch off of this particular rifle firing this particular round. And while that may not seem that important, it actually is pretty easy to explain.
Actually, I'm going to answer that.
Good, because I need a beer.
So, whenever you're putting rounds down range, recoil plays a big factor in that. every little bit of recoil can throw off your follow-up shots. Your follow-up shots are very important when you're trying to get suppressive fire in a combat environment. So when you're following up, even just a little bit of jiggle, even just a minute amount, can throw off your aim point, which will throw off your follow-up shots.
So 3.637, while it doesn't sound like a lot when a shotgun's at 30, is enough to mess you up with a rifle in a combat zone. All of our products at Steelworks were designed for combat zones. So that being said, what we're looking at here with our recoil, our known recoil, remember, this is factoring in no aesthetics. It's not factoring your stock, your buffer spring. It's not factoring in a brake or anything. That is, if this was a bolt gun, a barrel firing around against a solid block. So when you're trying to reduce recoil, what you're trying to do is minimize this number as low as you can possibly get it. Now, you're never really going to get to zero because Newton has some laws, which I don't like, by the way, because gravity can hurt. But what we decided to do was take into account, you already got a buffer spring, right? It's pretty standard. Now there's a few other models out there that actually do a pretty good job of reducing this felt recoil. There is still motion coming back and it does create inertia, so there are some more complex formulas that take that stuff into account. Our muzzle brake was designed to reduce that even further without having to add something along the lines of a stabilizer like you would see on a bow and arrow. You theoretically could put a stabilizer out front and reduce this, right? Because you have a vast amount of force coming up and pushing back. Now there is a few different ways people have gone about solving this issue, which we're going to get into right now. Traditional brakes that are trying to stop recoil feature, I call them slant brakes. There's ports that are actually slanted down back toward the fire. If the bullet is traveling this way down the barrel, and this represents the brake, the gases are going to travel down here, they're going to get caught up in these baffles, they're going to cast out at an angle. What this is going to do is pull the brake and the barrel and the gun forward, reducing felt recoil, right? Problem is, all those hot gases and that carbon that's being expelled are blowing back towards you, the angry fire. This is not such a big problem if you're, say, a sniper and you're trying to engage targets and you're not trying to get an immediate follow-up shot. You have time to reset, recalibrate, and reacquire your target. If you're behind a weapon system where you're trying to engage an enemy or suppress an enemy, that becomes a problem. You start to lose focus over your optics, you can lose your target, and frankly, you might not even be able to see after a couple seconds. So, we try to solve the problem by approaching it a little bit differently. The Riot Maker muzzle brake is designed a little bit different than the slant brake. All right, we did not want any angled ports in our brakes, so we did not want it to interfere with our target acquisition. So, here's a side view of our muzzle brake and kind of demonstrates the path of the bullet and the kinds of gases we're trying to eject. And of course, here's a top view which shows the side port here. The bullet comes down here. There's actually a ratio, without giving away trade secrets on how we designed this thing. There's actually a gap in between the bullet and the sidewall, a pretty decent sized gap, and it actually varies depending on the caliber. As it comes down, the gases are actually expelled where we want them. We've kind of mapped out where a rifle wants to go. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about muzzle rise. There's more ports on top. Obviously, we're trying to force the barrel down to stabilize it. We do have some bottom ports to help keep the pressures from building up too much inside the chamber. Then the side dumps get rid of any excess gas that we don't want pushing back on us. The end result, there is gas that comes out the front behind the bullet, propelling the bullet. And that's okay, but what we've done is we've successfully stabilized the barrel and we've reduced by a pretty healthy margin the felt recoil. This is not going to reduce the felt recoil as much as a slant brake, but in a combat situation where you do not want the carbon blowback, this is going to give you a pretty substantial reduction without actually having that those slants. And again, we'll get into muzzle rise here in the next segment. And this is your happy face.
The answer to that's actually pretty simple. The energy is going to follow the path of least resistance. Your body's made up of 2 arms, 2 legs, head, shoulder, unless you're Josh and you got that big ass head held up by nothing but facial hair. Therefore, gun ergonomics have remained the same since they've been designed.
What Jesse said is absolutely correct. Human body acting as a fulcrum tends to lead to everything going up and slightly to the right if you're right-handed fire, up and slightly to the left if you're left-handed fire. At AMP, we've actually spent a lot of time and energy running a lot of mathematical equations trying to fix the ergonomics of a firearm. Of course, our muzzle brake is our chief product, and we feel like we've put the biggest reduction in these forces in this one product. We're also going through and working on gun stock designs. We have a couple different models, testing different principles. For example, increasing the surface area on the shoulder to spread out the pounds per square inch that you feel on your shoulder. The problem with that is it interferes with body armor, so we started going with a thinner design with a little bit more length to get around that. We've adjusted everything from pistol grip shape, the weight to affect the balance of the firearm. But one thing has never changed, and that is the effectiveness of our muzzle brake design. Without changing any of the other ergonomics in a 30-30 rifle, just the application of our muzzle brake, this rifle that normally produces around 11 pounds per square inch of recoil force, which is enough to hurt your shoulder after a few rounds. Most people will put it down after firing 20 rounds or so. If you were to shoot it one-handed like a pistol, it would probably damage or break your finger. With the addition of our brake, we've actually been able to shoot this thing one-handed like a pistol and actually hit rounds on target. We actually get a little bit of downforce on the barrel as well, which is kind of entertaining. That video will be featured in a few future videos, but you can see a couple clips of that on our YouTube channel or on our Instagram. Hopefully after today's video you guys see that we put a lot of thought behind our products and a lot of development goes into them. When it comes to prototyping, we put the same level of care into every product we produce here in-house. We're not interested in producing a mass product, we're more interested in producing the right product, the better mousetrap. I hope you guys have enjoyed your time with us today and time with my associates and esteemed colleagues, and hopefully you had a couple beers of your own. We'll see you next time.